The dawn mist curled over the urchin sea like steam from an enormous teacup, and through that vapor glided the most improbably threatening vessel ever to lace the waves, the Afternoon Terror. A broad-beam brig whose billowing sails were unmistakably hand-knitted in a jolly seed stitch. Each panel was a different pastel, giving the craft the appearance of a floating patchwork quilt, at least until one noticed the skull and cross teapot flag flapping from the mast. Behind the ship's granny square wheel stood Captain Mabel Scarlet Needles O'Malley, spectacles glinting, red shawl fluttering like a captured sunset. She pressed a brass spyglass to her eye, spotted the cargo bark ahead, and allowed herself a smile as wicked as an uncut Christmas cake. "Ready the kettles, ladies," she barked. Voice equal parts parlor warmth and quarterdeck thunder. Around her bustled a dozen rebellious grandmothers, all armed with oversized knitting needles tucked into their corset lanyards. First Mate Dorothea Storm-Eyes Monk straightened her orthopedic back brace and called down to the gun deck. "Heat the water and load the peppermint shot. We'll have those scallywags steeped before second breakfast." Agnes the bosun cracked arthritic knuckles that sounded like snapping biscuits and began winding the main sheet using a crocheted capstan cover for extra grip. Their target was the plump merchant vessel Kaiserin's Folly, rumored to be transporting tins of the near-mythic Dragon's Breath Darjeeling. Captain Mabel wanted that tea in her lockbox before any landlubber could dunk so much as a stale scone. The Terror's knitted sails puffed, catching a fickle breeze summoned, some said, by the collective clacking of needles across the deck. As the gap closed, the grandmothers erupted into a practiced choreography. Mildred sprinted, wobbled briskly to the forecastle, unwinding a skein of tensile alpaca yarn. Sadie lined the rail with tea-cozy cannons that looked cute enough for a church bazaar, until one noticed the smoldering fuses protruding from embroidered daisies. Aboard the merchant ship, deckhands stared in bewildered horror at the pastel juggernaut bearing down on them. Before they could decide whether to laugh or run, Agnes shouted, "Fire!" The tea-cozy cannons thudded. Out-arced glittering globes of ceramic, each packed with scalding peppermint infusion. They shattered against the Kajiran's hull, releasing clouds of minty steam that instantly clogged lungs and eyes. While the crew coughed and fumbled, the grandmothers unleashed their secret weapon, the Afghani hook grappler, a massive crochet hook with rope ladder attached. With surprising vigor, Creta hurled it up and over the gunwale. Captain Mayberg led the boarding party. She landed on the enemy deck like a hopped-up librarian, thrusting her knitting needles forward. "Nobody move! We're commandeering your tea!" "You can't be serious!" In response, Mabel wound yarn round his ankles faster than gossip spreads at a quilting bee. Then yanked, he toppled with a thud that rattled cargo crates. Within minutes, Dorothea and the others located the teak crate stamped with a golden dragon. They pried one open. The aroma within was so rich it almost hummed a sea shanty. By mid-morning, the Afternoon Terror sailed away victorious, leaving the Kaiserin's Folly behind, its deck coated in cooling peppermint glaze. The grandmothers celebrated with a cuppa from their newly acquired stash, though Mabel allowed only a single tea bag per kettle. "We're thrifty pirates," she reminded them. "These must last till we find the Imperial Oolong." Mention of that legendary leaf sent an excited ripple through the crew. According to rumor, the Imperial Oolong was guarded in the fortress port of Verdantia, locked away in the Royal Navy's customs house under 24-hour sentry and a labyrinth of bureaucratic paperwork. It was, in short, perfect. As afternoon sunlight glittered on the woolen sails, the grandmothers set about repairs. Battle had torn a grapefruit-sized hole in the starboard mainsail. No matter. Winifred fetched her number 15 needles each as long as a cutlass and began darning the gap with practiced speed. Elsewhere, Mildred darned a deckhand sock while simultaneously splicing a length of hemp cable. Multitasking was second nature to these women, who had spent decades juggling grandchildren, potlucks, and the quiet rebellion of refusing to act their age. Even the ship's parrot, Polly Pearl, was knitted in amigurumi macaw stuffed with cedar shavings and perched proudly beside the wheel, occasionally squawking, Make it steep, make it steep. Night fell, and the crew gathered in the wardroom around a brass samovar engraved with crossed needles. Candlelight flickered over florid wrinkles as Captain Mabel unrolled a tea-stained map. Verdantia lies 3 days south, southeast-east, past the shallows of Snoose, she explained, tapping the parchment. But the Royal Navy keeps a picket line. We'll need stealth. Storm Eyes adjusted her bifocals. Disguises, perhaps? The Order of St. Camomile's charity cruise sets sail tomorrow. Picture it, a bunch of harmless grannies offering hand-knit socks to lonely sailors. A beat of silence, then every face cracked into identical mischievous grins. Plans were stitched together faster than a garter-stitch scarf. The next morning, the afternoon terror underwent a miraculous transformation. Down came the skull and cross tappy pot flag. Up went a banner bearing a demure teacup haloed by lavender sprigs. The gun ports were masked with hanging plant baskets. Each granny exchanged her cutlass-toting corset for an apron embroidered with scripture quotes, though the knitting needles remained tucked, just in case. When the Royal Navy frigate HMS Stricture hailed them, Mabel affected her sweetest quilting circle accent. "Good morrow, fine officers," were but simple women delivering comfort socks to troops. The lieutenant scanned their floating patchwork and evidently decided nothing knitted could be dangerous. He waved them through. By sundown, Verdantia's coastal fortress loomed. Granite walls rose from the water like a disgruntled scone. Watchtowers bristled with cannons and bureaucrats. The grannies anchored in a nearby cove and rowed ashore under cover of darkness, outfitted with utility belts, swarming with stitch markers, and retractable tape measures. Greta produced her patent-pending Yarn Bomb MP2, essentially a pom-pom stuffed with concentrated lavender and valerian. One lob over the parapet later, a section of guards collapsed into cozy dreams of childhood blanket forts. Within the fortress, halls were lit by flickering oil lamps and the oppressive glow of paperwork. The grannies padded forward in sensible orthopedic shoes, dispatching would-be obstacles with stern lectures on posture or surprise butterscotch candies that glued jaws shut. At the Customs House vault, they encountered a locked iron door bearing the seal of King Clement VIII and a sign, "Absolutely no knitting beyond this point." Storm Eyes snorted. "Well, now I feel provoked." She withdrew twin steel needles, honed to a whisper-thin point, and picked the lock in 6 heartbeats, mumbling, "Purl 2, slip 1, turn and click." The vault glimmered with culinary contraband, saffron rotes, cacao ingots, spice rubies, but the grandmother's eyes fixed on a glass humidor atop a pedestal, within which rested a single satin pouch embroidered with imperial chrysanthemum. Captain Mabel approached reverently. "Imperial oolong," she breathed. Legend claimed each leaf was hand-rolled by the emperor's own grandmother, a woman said to have wielded enough matriarchal power to end 3 wars with a single scowl. Carefully, Mabel swapped the pouch for a decoy bag filled with shredded grocery store tea bags dyed green. Weight for weight, perfect. They retreated, relocking the door for dramatic flair. As they crept toward the courtyard, cannon fire rocked the walls. Outside, the HMS Stricture had returned, and its captain had finally grown suspicious of a charity cruise traveling under cover of night. Searchlights swept the ramparts. The grandmothers broke into a shuffle, dignified to run, but faster than any mortal had a right to expect. At the seawall, they unfurled balls of chunky yarn, tying quick rappelling lines. One by one they descended, knitting on the way down to calm nerves. Mabel was halfway when the alarm bell rang and musket balls sparked overhead. She muttered, "Hurry, we'll miss elevensies at this rate." Boats launched, they rode furiously through searchlight beams. A lucky shot punctured the stern of Dorothea's dinghy, but Winifred, never without a crochet hook, darned the leak mid-paddle. Upon reaching the afternoon terror, they sprang into an emergency casting-on drill. Sailcloth of ordinary make would never outrun a frigate, so they knitted new spinnakers right there on deck, needles clacking like a swarm of caffeinated woodpeckers. In record time, the terror leapt forward, pastel wings straining the rigging. The Royal Navy gave chase, cannons booming, but Agnes deployed a barrage of yarn bombs whose soporific lavender clouds drifted back over the pursuers. One by one, the enemy gunners slumped across their artillery, snoring into regulation epaulets. Dawn splashed apricot light over calm seas. The afternoon terror coasted into the uncharted zephyr expanse, where no flag but their own had meaning. The grandmothers collapsed into deck chairs Bartholomew, recliners liberated from a cruise liner last year, and dozed until the kettle whistle summoned them to the wardroom. There, Captain Mabel ceremonially opened the pouch, a fragrant plume unfurled that smelled of jasmine, toasted chestnut, and distant thunder. Agnes removed a single leaf with tweezers, set it reverently into a porcelain pot, and poured water heated exactly to 92 degrees. The infusion bloomed like a verdant sunrise. Each grandmother took a measured sip. Silence reigned. Eyes closed, memories flickered of first loves, lost dances, the tiny, astonishing hands of newborn grandchildren. At last Mabel exhaled. Worth every stitch. They toasted with rock sugar lumps, then parceled portions into tiny tins destined for far-flung hideouts. Pirates they might be, but waste they would not abide. Celebration was short-lived. Polly Pearl squawked from the crow's nest. Sails on the horizon! Coffee rigging! Coffee rigging! The parrot's cotton eyes spotted what spyglasses soon confirmed. A fleet of trendy baristas from the Republic of Caffeine, sworn enemies of tea everywhere, their black and chrome clippers slicing waves with artisanal menace. Their flagship, the Espresso Yourself, sported portside milk-frothing cannons capable of coating a whole hull in sticky foam. The grandmother stiffened. Nothing offended them more than snobbery toward a proper brew. Strategic Council convened instantly. We can't fight foam with wool, Winifred warned. It'll mat. Storm Eyes rubbed her temples. Then we outwit them. Those hipsters respect only novelty. Captain Mabel's eyes lit up behind bifocals. Novelty, you say? She rummaged in a steamer trunk and produced a prototype tea bag the size of a pillow, stitched in crimson silk. The Kraken Cozy. I've been saving it. Inside was not tea, but concentrated chamomile syrup mixed with fizzy lifting salts. Detonated beneath a ship, it would unleash bubbles so calming, even decaf skeptics would succumb to naps. They sewed the Kraken Cozy to a water-winged harness and, under cover of twilight, rode it toward the Espresso Yourself. Mildred, posing as a stranded grandmother on a floater chair, hailed the barista crew. Oh, dears, could you spare a splash of oat milk for a tired old lady? While the bemused hipsters tried to find an ethically sourced straw, Storm Eyes slipped the Kraken Cozy under their keel and yanked the igniter cord. A muffled whoomp rippled the sea. Effervescent chamomile erupted, enveloping the ship in sweet sleep bubbles. Within minutes, 22 artisan mustaches drooped, as owners collapsed in blissful torpor, no longer caring about single-learn beans. The remaining ships saw their leader drift away in foamy oblivion and prudently struck colors. The afternoon terror sailed on, dignity restored, kettle boiling. That night, beneath a canopy of constellations that resembled assorted biscuits, the grandmothers hosted a deck party. String lights, crocheted from glowworm silk, twinkled overhead. They danced the Charleston, joints cracking like percussion, and told scandalously mild anecdotes about prank calls to grandchildren. Storm Eyes produced her mandolin, Agnes accompanied with spoons. Even Polly Pearl flapped down to perch on the samovar, harmonizing with yarn-accented squawks. Around midnight, Mabel retreated to her cabin, where a patchwork quilt of past victories hung. A Spanish fan signed by the Earl of Chamomile, a cork from the champagne of teas captured in the Battle of Brunch Bay. She added the imperial oolong pouch to the place of honor. Then she opened a battered diary whose pages smelled of bergamot and scribbled, Note to self, the world underestimates a woman with a teapot and a plan. Must write to granddaughter, remind her revolution is just tradition brewed stronger. After a pause, she tucked a single oolong leaf into an envelope. Tomorrow a carrier gull would ferry it ashore with instructions, share only with those who listen. The next days were calm, giving the crew time for hobbies. Winifred knitted a cozy for the main cannon, complete with pom-pom fuse cover. Mildred experimented with spherical tea bags modeled on cannonballs. Dorothy charted new territories, naming them after pastries: Strudel Shoals, Ladyfinger Lagoon. Young deckhands from earlier conquests, lads who'd signed on because nobody back home believed their story of woolen pirates, launched a shipboard gardening club, overseen sternly by Agnes to ensure proper composting. The afternoon terror became a floating retirement community crossed with a revolution, and its wake glittered with the possibilities of disobedient creativity. Yet peace never lingers long for those addicted to adventure or caffeine substitutes. One placid afternoon, a message in a bottle bumped against the hull. Inside, a pleas for aid from the Isles of Earl, where an evil corporation was replacing loose-leaf tradition with tasteless instant granules. The grandmothers exchanged looks weighted with purpose. Captain Mabel rang the deck bell. "Ladies, warm up the samovar. We sail at dawn." Cheers erupted, needles flashed, sails unfurled, and the afternoon terror angled toward destiny. Pastel panels catching the wind like giant pieces of rebellious confetti. Below deck, the Imperial Oolong rested safe in its pouch, fragrant promise of future tea times. Above, stars emerged, blinking approval as the patchwork brig carved a silver path across black waters. Old age, the grandmothers reflected, was merely a superstition, an old wives' tale, for people who'd never met the right old wives. For in the hands of a determined grandmother, yarn becomes steel, tea becomes treasure, and the sea itself becomes one gigantic kettle, forever on the boil, forever inviting those brave enough to taste what lies beyond the horizon.